Hi everyone, welcome back to another Free Tutorial Friday. I know it's been a while. I've been off traveling a lot, doing workshops in 3 different countries and super busy. So I'm trying to get back into it, although I will be traveling again next week. So hopefully we have one today and maybe another one in a couple of weeks, and then hopefully a nice rhythm of back to tutorials through the month of August. Today, I wanted to talk about design drawing versus illustration. And I say versus, it sounds like a cage match, right? We've got like design versus illustration. It's not actually that. They're different ways of thinking. You know, when we do nice illustrations, we care much more about line quality, composition, and things like that to make a beautiful, drawing in itself. And a lot of times for the drawing quality. But when we do design sketches, we really are interested in the ideas and not so much the illustration. But we always, and this is where it gets tough, you always want to do a nice drawing because nice drawings really help sell ideas. So I want to just show you some of my past drawings. I just pulled some examples out of my flat file this morning. And these are what I would call working sketches. When I do working sketches, I still try to come back and do a little bit of nice line weight here and there, but I don't mind making corrections to lines. And so you'll see here this line goes over the top of this one. So that line goes behind that fender. And it's actually the stronger line. So yes, I try to make a nice illustration, but when I often do focus in more on illustration and less on design, meaning not worrying about these sorts of lines that are incorrect, or that one up there, or if I was doing a nice illustration, I might just stay with this line, even though it's the wrong proportion, as opposed to stopping and going, oh, that needs to be shorter, and then drawing this line. So I find that when I focus in on doing nicer illustrations, usually my designs suffer. The styling, the overall accuracy of maybe the perspective, because I haven't put in as many guidelines. So I like to try and separate those two different disciplines. So again, this for me is a working sketch where I'm not really concerned with line quality. I'm just drawing through all the parts. So where the wing attaches on the far side of the fuselage, extending angles of elements to help me draw it more accurately in perspective, putting in section lines, and then making little notes to myself, oh, that needs to change. That's my little shorthand, is that little squiggle to ignore that line when I do an overlay. And so this whole process, for the most part, is doing, adding as much construction as you need and not worrying first about line quality, but worrying mostly about, the idea and the accuracy. And like this is a note for myself to fix that far side A-pillar there and push that curve back. I thought it was too sharp. And so a lot of my sketches will have those little notes throughout, squiggles, crossing out lines. And then I'll do an overlay. These are kind of showing through, maybe I can do that. So here's the working sketch, right, where I figure out the proportions, figure out is the idea appropriate for what I'm trying to design, and then I do an overlay on top. Line that up. You can see it there. And then that's where I do the pass to come back in and figure out all the details. So, and then you get something like this, and then I would probably scan that and then throw some value on it in Photoshop. You can even start to overlay, right there. That's actually like my finished overlay drawing. And then you might add elements to your scene in the form of other constructions and overlays. So you just line up. So I have a very light outline here of where to line it up with the other sketch once I've scanned it. So something like that. So I could add in this boat, and then I might also do a line drawing back over the top of that if I want it to be really tight, or just take this in if it's going to be painted, with some value and color. That line drawing is actually tight enough. So it really depends. Are you going to show the line drawing, or are you going to put value on it? If you put value on something, the line drawing becomes less important, because really we don't see things with lines, we see things with values, and all your lines will disappear. So if I was going to do this little solo helicopter here chasing this car, I might just take that, scan it, and start painting right on top of it. But if I was going to show it, right, here's another construction. If I was going to show it in line drawing form to get the stamp of approval before I go and render it, because we might have lots and lots of options that we're picking from, then I would probably show sketches like these, right, with some nicer line quality because it's faster than trying to render something in full value. So in this case, the line, when I do the overlay, then I do all my overlapping lines. Like there is a video on this channel as well that talks about line quality specifically. So I'm applying all those same ideas to these types of drawings. And it's really just like traditional figure drawing to get these elements to overlap each other. And then I could take that, scan it once a direction has been chosen, and put value on it. And then if I'm going to move, say in this case I moved the propellers from the previous shot where it was flying straight up, and I want it to fly a little more forward, so there's my construction. And I found, it's a really romantic idea to do a beautiful illustration, beautiful line quality, etc. in your very first drawing. But I've always found when I do that, usually my perspective or my design or styling suffer because I don't want to make changes, right? Once you have a beautiful mark on the page, you're hesitant to get rid of it, and because your drawing quality, it won't be as nice in illustration. So I really found that sort of the divide and conquer method works best for me, which is don't worry about the illustrative quality. Really just worry if it's, in perspective, the right proportion, it's the right solution to the problem, and then do an overlay and make a nicer illustration. Now, the last thing we'll talk about is that there are ways to start to bring the two together. Now, it has a little bit to do with picking the right media, meaning finding the right paper and the right pen that allows you to investigate a little bit before you commit. This is not an example of that. This is a brush pen or a chisel pen, just a sketchbook page with a felt chisel tip, and every mark you put on the page is going to be visible. So this allows for really no corrections, no exploration. But if you, can pre-visualize enough and think ahead, you can get a nice illustration, but usually, and then this is really in my case, I will not have the opportunity to make corrections. Like if I didn't like where this line was at or this proportion or curve, with this pen on this paper, I can't change it, right? I'm just stuck. So I would have to either scan that and then work it over in Photoshop or just redraw it in another sketch. But let's say like this medium, this pen on this paper is very unforgiving. So if you're interested in making a nice illustration, I would probably not use this pen very, very first sketch. You can make a nice illustration, but you're not going to get to investigate the design. So let's look at some different mediums. Okay, this little sketch is a ballpoint pen, and you probably can't see it on camera, and that's the idea, is that there's a lot of very, very light lines in there that really disappear, and so I can start to do more investigation, right, more exploration, because I can draw very lightly. Unlike this pen, right, where every first mark on the page I have to live with, here I can explore, right? And so you're kind of getting the opportunity, because of the medium you choose, in this case, to do your working sketch, and then if it's light enough, you can still come back in with some heavy line weight to separate out some of your elements, like this tire off of that, suspension area there. You can still try to get the two to come together. So you get a nicer illustration and a sketch that you've got to explore a little bit before you commit. Even then, I tend to sacrifice ideas and style over the quality of the illustration when I start to draw that way. I sort of, I know that, and so I know if I was going to scan that and render over the top, I would just fix all that, in Photoshop. Working sketches can look, a lot like this, where I'm drawing through everything, and then come back and still try to put on some heavy line weight so that the working sketch is a little bit a little bit nicer illustration. Again, this is not a forgiving medium, right? It's just a Sharpie on a piece of paper, but this is more like what working sketches look like. You know, they're scruffy. You have all sorts of things that you want to change, so it's really about getting your ideas down quickly and not worrying about right. So this would be more like the range of quick sketch or thumbnail sketch, where you're starting to do your very first exploration and just work out ideas quickly. And then a working sketch of that, right, would start to take into account perspective and foreshortening, and you would tighten it up. I still wouldn't worry about line quality, but I would worry about, you know, the next level of refinement. And then I would do the overlay, and I might take something like that and blow it up to do a better working sketch over the top. But many times, working sketches look something like this, right? Where you're trying to save a sketch by adding a background, right? Or you stop a sketch because it's ugly and you don't want to take it any further, and that's fine. And so, but it doesn't make for a nice illustrative page. You know, there's an awful proportion sketch over there that I don't like. I don't like this one. This one I didn't like where that was going, so I scribbled in this little background. And they're more like notes to yourself. And then I would try to make a nice illustration. So if you want to try and bring the two together, draw with something light. So in this case, this one, a light ballpoint pen, and it's a paper that has some nice tooth to it, right, which means it has some texture. So with that texture, it allows me to draw very lightly. So I can actually build a better construction. I can explore the proportions. Then I can commit to the line work. And I get sort of the best of both worlds. A little exploration and a nicer illustration at the end. And then this one, not so much. This one, brush pen. So it's faster because you can't really explore. But you sort of get what you get, right? And so this engine I don't like, and it's a little bit crooked and the proportions aren't right. And so I just have to live with it in the sketch. You know, so it's always a balance. But I find if I can separate mentally, you know, my disciplines into just worrying about, is it the right idea for the problem, right, or the right solution? And can I get the proportions right? Can I get the styling right? Then I think about illustration. You're always trying to bring the two together. But if I use a medium that's difficult, it's that much more difficult to make those things work, as opposed to doing something like this from a previous video, but you saw that when we did these, or I guess I did them and you watched them, we start out with a really loose, very, very light marker sketch, and that allows for the exploration. Then you can add your line weight back over the top. Then you can even add value back over the top of that. And so I find for me this is the most productive, is to find a medium that's light, then you can go dark. And so I take a design approach first, searching for proportion, searching for style, searching for a silhouette. Then I put on sort of an illustrator's hat, and now I try to make that a more presentable drawing by adding line weight and then eventually adding value. There's one last example. So that would be an overlay of one of my hot rods, and where I'm really concerned with the line quality and making a nice drawing that then I would scan and maybe paint back over the top. In this case, it was a 3D model that I had done, and then I drew over the top, made some refinements and changes, and then I would scan this and then I overlaid it back on top of my 3D model rendering, and then sort of faded the two together. So I hope that helps you think about how to approach drawings and thinking about, you know, illustration versus design. Again, not in the form of a cage match, but in the way that they are slightly different, and not to put pressure on yourself when trying to do a nice illustration with beautiful marks, that you also try to do a beautiful design. I find that they're many, many times in conflict with each other, and when I loosen up on the illustrative side without the pressure of trying to do a beautiful drawing, I usually get a better design. It opens up some sort of headspace, it seems like, to just think about design. Think about style, proportion ideas first, and then I put on my illustrator's hat and I start to think about presentation and how I can make that idea, more presentable and more attractive through doing a nice illustration. So I hope that helps you, and I'll be back in a couple weeks. And until then, have a great summer. Bye-bye.